idyllic conditions for this fall day in Baltimore for the 14th annual running of the Baltimore Running Festival. So good to have you with us today on a day that nature has given her smile to, and 25,000 runners wind their way through the streets of Baltimore. And Dave Burdan continues to set the pace in the men's marathon. The defending champion, the cross-country coach at Stevenson University, suffered a hip injury during his training, but he is holding up to that as his lead is also holding up. Burdan working his way toward mile number 10 in Federal Hill. He'll make the turn at mile 11 around the Under Armour campus before winding back to the Inner Harbor and then heading over in the direction of Little Italy and Fells Point. We have our first winners of,
and we're waiting for Deb to hand it off to Karen. Reporting live, Rob Roblin, WBAL TV 11 News. Back to you guys.
Thank you, Robbie, as we watch Dave Burdan, the leader, taking part in what is evolving into a courageous effort as he continues to lead. But you watch that stride. He is in visible pain, bothered by a left hip injury in his training, and we have seen his stride deteriorate since the early miles of this race. He is gritting. You can tell this is going to be an endurance race, not only of his conditioning, but of his pain threshold, whether he can hold up for the final 13, 14 miles of this race. He's on mile 12, working his way along Key Highway, still alone, but he is now being tracked by the number 2 runner, Brian Rosenberg from Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, a 37-year-old CPA who finished 3rd in the Baltimore Marathon last year. And Brian Rosenberg may see his opportunity to try to eclipse the leader, Dave Burdan, who right now is running in the shadow of what could be the number 2 competitor. Can't tell right now whether that is a relay runner or if it is in fact Brian Rosenberg. But Dave Burdan, who has run alone, Kate, since the start of this race, is running in invisible pain and is now looking over his shoulder to see he does have company in mile number 12. And that accompaniment could be Brian Rosenberg. And that is Brian Rosenberg running with Dave Burdan on mile number 12. The 3rd place finisher a year ago from Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, is now running stride for stride with Dave Burdan. So what looked like another potential wire-to-wire run for the track coach from Stevenson University has now turned into a personal struggle in his battle against a hip injury, while Brian Rosenberg tries to eclipse him and take the top spot. Our live coverage continues on what could be a very dramatic second half of the 2014 running of the Baltimore Marathon.
Mills.
Mile 12 on Key Highway, and it's a new leader in the Baltimore Marathon, Brian Rosenberg, a 37-year-old CPA from Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. He's not calculating credits and debits this morning. He's calculating split times as he has passed Dave Burdan, the defending champion, who we saw struggle with a left hip injury that he suffered during training. And now Brian Rosenberg, who is running with what appears to be an effortless stride, working his way toward Pratt Street and the Inner Harbor at the midway point of this marathon. And Kate, for the first time in 2 years, we have a leader other than Dave Burdan.
And Dave Burdan, one of his sayings is 26 miles, anything can happen. Now let me tell you, this bib number 2, Brian Rosenberg, had been running for the first 10 miles basically next to a guy named Chris Beck. It looked like the 2 of them were going to catch up to or overtake Dave Burdan, but then Chris got a side stitch going downhill. He's running way faster than he's used to, and he's totally dropped back. So there you see, anything can happen on any day. You train for so long, 130 miles a week for one day. It's one of the things that makes a marathon so heartbreaking and that makes a marathon so thrilling, and you have seen that play out here just within the last 5-6 minutes.
And Dave Burdan has now disappeared from the leader cam view, so he has fallen well off the pace in a very short period of time. And you have to wonder if Dave Burdan will even be able to finish this race, as he is running with a left hip injury. And Brian Rosenberg has taken over the lead position here in the Baltimore Marathon. He's a lifetime Oriole fan. He's attended many games at Camden Yards and many Ravens games as well. And this race, of course, finishing on a Ravens walk between Oriole Park at M&T Bank Stadium. Spent 8 years working in the Baltimore area and now lives in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. But he has a chance to make Baltimore his town today for the first time in 2 years. A different leader than Dave Burdan as Brian Rosenberg setting the pace as he works his way through the Inner Harbor at the midway point of this race. From here, the race winds through Little Italy, all flat terrain, Fells Point and Canton, and then the turn up the east side of this course. And that's where we'll find out whether Brian Rosenberg can stand up to the challenge of the course. Last year, that course saw him finish third behind Dave Burdan. This year, he has now taken over the lead, and it is now his race to try to win.
So he has passed the halfway point of this race, which is good news for him. His personal best was in the Philly Marathon last year, 2:34:02. His only goal for today was to get a new personal record, and at this point, he's on pace to do that.
He is the leader of the 2014 Baltimore Marathon as our live coverage rolls on with a new leader, a new pace setter out front. Brian Rosenberg, the new leader of the Baltimore Marathon, but there are many ages, many shapes, many sizes of runners, including the little runners and the Kids Fun Run, and we're going to see that coming up next. 600 participants, and these are the little tykes who will be
right back into this community.
One of the other events, organizations, Every Yard for Yardley from the One Love Foundation. They've raised $30,000 for the One Love Foundation. Their goal is to end relationship violence through education and technology. It honors the life of the late Yardley Love. Foundation started by her mom, Sharon Love. And there's your leader, Brian Rosenberg, on mile 13. He's on the second half of this course now. He eclipsed Dave Burdan, the defending champion, and Dave Burdan, who on mile 12 saw his lead disappear. He had been plagued by a hip injury. It was evident he was running at a great deal of pain, and it is not evident that Dave Burdan will even be able to finish this course.
Now, let me tell you, to give you an idea, if you've never run a marathon, how big this course is, our spotters are trying to find him. You know, you got to bike back a mile or two. They say they have not seen him on the course after the Inner Harbor. Obviously, we're a mile or two past that at this point. We're hoping that he didn't drop out. Maybe he just slowed down. Maybe he just stopped to stretch and see if he could get back on his feet. That would really be heartbreaking.
Last year, he ran it in 2 hours, 30 minutes, and 6 seconds. It was not a personal best. It was not a course best, but it was the best of the day, and he became the first Baltimorean ever to win the Baltimore Marathon. In the first 13 years of this race, the first 12 years, it was won by Ethiopians and Kenyans on the men's side. And then last year, for the first time, this race did not have a title sponsor, so there is no monetary reward for the first place finishers in any of the categories, and that turned this into an opportunity for some of the top local runners to have their moment in the spotlight. That moment a year ago belonged to Dave Burdan, but for this moment, it's Brian Rosenberg who is out in front of the crowd. And that crowd includes 4,000 runners in this marathon who run at a very different pace than Dave Burdan or Brian Rosenberg, and that's the charm of this race in Charm City. If you have the intestinal fortitude, the training, the desire to run 26.2 miles, whether you run it at a shuffling stride or if you run it at a breakneck 5.5-minute stride, this is your day to enjoy the city, to compete. Whether you are competing in the shadow of Federal Hill, the Inner Harbor, Patterson Park, or within the shadow of Camden Yards. The half marathon will be getting underway shortly at the midway point of the Inner Harbor, and that's when 11,000 runners are introduced to this course that will merge with the marathon runners like Brian Rosenberg at mile 16 at Patterson Park. One of the trickiest points on this course, because not only does it initiate the uphill climb, there is a traffic congestion issue that Brian Rosenberg won't have to deal with, but most of the runners in the marathon will, as they have to navigate the merge of 11,000 runners being introduced to this course.
Our spotters say Brian Rosenberg is running smooth. He's crushed mile 14. The pace for mile 14, 5:34. That's a great split.
So at mile 14, he is just past Cafe Gia in Little Italy and is pointing in the direction of Fells Point, and then of course to Canton. All flat terrain at this point, but then at the turn, the next challenge won't be another runner apparently for Brian Rosenberg. It will be the course itself, and we have seen this course reorganize and restructure the leadership on that east side, so we'll see if he can hang into that. He knows what to face because he ran this course last year and finished third behind Dave Burdan, who has fallen way off the pace after mile 12. That hip injury, he was gritting through it, and you could tell the pace was too much. So Burdan has fallen off the pace, and this race for the moment now belongs to Brian Rosenberg.
And one of the interesting things that I think about the sport of road racing, you're on the same course. I love to say that, same conditions, but you basically have the same strategy. So Brian Rosenberg and Burdan, if he was still running with him, you try to save all your energy for the second half, but you know that you're coming up to the horrible 5 miles of hills, and you have to pace yourself, you have to slow down, you have to know that that's coming, you have to allow yourself to run those miles a little bit slower so that you can pick that back up after you get past Lake Montebello. You got to preserve your energy. You can't expect to run every mile at the same pace. At the end, you want it to all even out, but you can't expect to run the mile 16 at the same pace that you run the last mile.
And now Rosenberg faces a challenge very few runners ever experience in a marathon, and that is not chasing someone. He was in the chase position a year ago, has never won this race, finished third. So in previous efforts, he has always had a runner in front of him. But since mile 12, now into mile 14, Brian Rosenberg, for the very first time in his career, is out front of the Baltimore Marathon. And Kate, physiologically, psychologically, that creates a very different experience because you no longer have anybody to pace you. You have to pace yourself.
And so here's another example. So the guy who's about a minute behind him said he's paying the price. He went out too early, too hard. He's got a side stitch right now he's trying to work through. I think the kids are getting ready.
Here they come down the fun run. On the topic of the full marathon, the early leader, Dave Burdan, the defending champion, has not been seen on the course since mile 13. Race organizers now operating under the presumption that he has withdrawn from the race, that he was unable to finish because of that painful left hip, which slowed him and enabled the current leader, Brian Rosenberg, to take over top spot. Rosenberg now on mile 15, working through Fells Point on his way to Canton, and then the big turn on the eastern edge of this course at Patterson Park. Brian Rosenberg with a 1-minute lead in front of Chris Bain from Tacoma Park, and Chris Beck behind him. But right now it has been Brian Rosenberg's race, and it has been since mile 12 when he passed Dave Burdan. We can update Brian Rosenberg now is on mile 18, so he has begun the uphill portion of the climb that could be his final test on whether or not he can hold up and win the 2014 Baltimore Marathon.
Now see, there's nobody on the streets here. The half marathon's going to start, and soon there's going to be 11,000 people going down the same street. If you're watching us and you're inside, go outside, cheer for these people, cheer for this guy. This guy's name is Brian. The second guy, Chris, is from Tacoma Park. The guy in third place is from Baltimore City. These are local guys. They need you to cheer for them.
And now to the start of the half marathon. The first of the 5 groups from the Inner Harbor. They are underway. And the largest portion of this crowd now running beneath the confetti, the horns blaring, and the energy starting to build down at the Inner Harbor. You just saw the crowd from street level as Jason Newton shared with that crowd. And it comes in waves. Let's go back to Jason right now and give you a feel of the
TV.
Brian Rosenberg continues to set the pace. He is within view now of Lake Montebello, almost at mile number 20 through 19 and a half miles. He has built a 3-minute lead over his nearest competitor, Chris Bain, also a 37-year-older. Rosenberg from Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. Bain from Tacoma Park. Rosenberg has stood up to the challenge of the incline on the eastern edge of this race. Another half mile. The course will flatten out as it goes around Lake Montebello And after that, he just has 6.2 miles left to go. He has seen his lead increase over the last 5 miles. The defending champion, Dave Burdan, has withdrawn from the race. He stopped running at mile 13. He lost his lead at mile 12. A painful hip injury suffered during training has felled his chance of repeating as champion here in the Baltimore Marathon. Jerry Sandusky, K-Tomorrow with you on a sensational day in Baltimore. Hope you're enjoying our live coverage. We are certainly enjoying your company as this day unfolds. And we celebrate our champions today from the wheelchair division. Congratulations to the hand crank champion, Bruce Newman from Stella.